Hello, welcome to my channel once again. In the last video, we started with Event Grid. In this video, we are going to be continuing in that series. So let me share my screen. Event Grid, Azure Event Grid. Okay, so I believe you can see my screen. I'll be introducing you to a couple of concepts in this video, so just follow me. So in the last video, we did a walkthrough where we used an Azure function as our event handler, and our event source was a storage account. We are still going to be using a storage account as our event source. However, in most scenarios, in most real life illustration, you wouldn't have the luxury to be coding directly from Azure function. You will need to work from Visual Studio. And if you are working from Visual Studio, you will need to make use of webhooks um as your as your event handler. So if I should come over here to events, so this is the storage account that I want to use for this demonstration. So I want to create a new subscription. I'll give it a name. Let me just call it GIGO um GIGO. Okay. Yeah, so that's the name of our event subscription. Then I'm still working with blob created, blob deletion. So I want an invocation based on these two event types. So there are so many other event types that you can capture um, in your event handler. So now this is where the action comes to play. Under the endpoint type, rather than go for Azure function, this time around we are going for webhook because we are not working with an Azure function, even though it's a function application, but we are using a webhook, which is a lot more complicated because when it's an Azure function, it's on the cloud, it's easier for the event source to communicate with it. But um, when it's from our Visual Studio, the application is running in our Visual Studio, then we need to open up our computer to the internet, and this brings a lot of memory. I could remember a couple of years ago when I was hosting an application using my computer as something like a data center to host a simple application. I knew all what I went through to get that to work. So I did a lot of port forwarding. My computer could not go off, and so many um technical details around that. But today there are a couple of tools that can open up your local host to the internet. So if I were to host an application now, and I want to use local hosts, a very simple application that I want to open up to the internet, maybe an endpoint or something. Um, I wouldn't have to go through so much stress like I did a couple of years ago. So for this demonstration, we are using a tool known as Ngrok. 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 Oh, sorry. Ngrok. Yeah, this is the tool we are using. And what this basically does is that it connects your local host to it opens up your endpoint, your local endpoint to the internet. So there's some kind of mapping. So when we start to work with it, you will see what I'm talking about. So this is where we are to enter the subscriber endpoint, which I'll be setting up very soon. So I will stop sharing this and open my Visual Studio. Or let me probably open Visual Studio first. Okay, so let me stop sharing and share my Visual Studio. I already have a simple application that contains the default code, so I do not need to create it again, but I just want you to see how to go about it. So we are picking a function application, then you go to next, then you give it a name. All this is fine. You go to next again. Then you choose the .NET framework. I usually select um version 6. I select version 6. So you should select version 6, even though it will expire soon, then you should probably update to version 8. I think you can also work with version 4, if I'm not mistaken. Then over here under the function, you can pick the type of trigger that you want to be set up, that you want to set up. In our case, it's event grid trigger, so that should be selected. Then you can create. So by creating this, you are going to see the the auto-generated code that you can use for what you want to do, which is what we are going to be using in this video. So let me stop sharing and open up the auto-generated code. It's exactly the same thing as what you would have seen if I had clicked on create. So let me open it. And I think I can share now. So let me share my Visual Studio again. Okay. Yeah, so this is the auto-generated code, just a simple code. It's similar to what we did the last time in the last video. The only difference is that this time around we are working from Visual Studio and we have our code here. So this is a function application. It's not on Azure, unlike the last function app that we worked with, which is an Azure function. This is not an Azure function because it isn't on Azure. Yeah, so basically this is it. But the interesting thing that we need to do is I'll still come back here. But um we need to download Ngrok. It's very easy and straightforward to download it. I already have it downloaded. So I will just allow us see um where to download it from. So you can just Google Ngrok download and you would come over here and you see um where to download it from. So let me share again. Okay, so you can see over here. So you can just come over to Windows and click to download. The one for Windows 4-bit and click to download and you're good. You have it downloaded. And you do not need to install anything. You just need to run the script file, and you'll be good using the ngrok command. So I already have it downloaded. So what I will do is I will open my command prompts. Yeah, I will open my command prompts. Let me share now. Yeah, so I believe you can see my command prompts. So I open my command prompt. So to run ngrok, It's very straightforward. Usually, we can use there are a couple of commands that you can use. You can use ngrok, HTTP, and the ports that you want to map the ngrok URL to. So, for example, um, let me just get it from here. So we can use something like ngrok, HTTP, and by default, my function app should work on 7071. So I can use ngrok HTTP 7071. This will do what I need to work with. However, the reason why I wouldn't be doing this is because this would is going to use my public IP address to generate the ngrok URL, which I do not want because my public IP has been the same for a long time now, and I do not want the whole world to know my public IP. So I need to have a custom URL that will not contain my public IP address. Aside from this, if you need to set some other parameters or you're having issues running it, you can also use this command, this code here. Yeah, so you can use this as well. Ngrok, we are looking at HTTP, the ports, we are setting the requests, header, and we are adding the host, local host, because local host is what we are using in my system. Aside from this, also, you can also use this. I really encourage you to go through Ngrok documentation. That's where I came up with all these commands. So their documentation is very straightforward. They also have a very good um, support channel. I faced some issues when I was working, when I was trying to get it to work, and I reached out to them and they were able to provide me the necessary support. And I didn't pay anything. It was completely free. So, I mean, that's really, really good. And the service is really, really helpful. So it opens you up your local host. You have an application in local host, you want to send it to someone in another country. You can use Ngrok to do some kind of mapping between the URL. So you can send the person your the Ngrok URL, which is connected to a particular port in your computer. So that's really what I use it for. It also have so many other uses, but for me, that's the need that it meets. So you can also enter this as well. But in my own case, I want to specify a URL. All this will work, but it's going to use my public IP as part of the generated Ngrok URL that we are going to be using in Azure. And I do not want that because I do not want the whole world to see my public IP. So what I'll be doing is I would make use of this. I'll specify the URL, and I got this URL from the Ngrok platform. So even though it's a free plan, but I am entitled to a custom URL. So this URL is what I'll be using. So basically, I need to confirm the ports um that my function app is running. If it's 7071, I'm not sure. So let's go and confirm that before we run this. So let me reshare. Let me go to my Visual Studio. So let me confirm the paths. It's under properties, launch setting. So it's running on port 7008. So that's the port that we need to use, 7008. So I'll go over here. So let me return, um, let me return to my command prompt, and I would 7008. So I think this is good. All things being equal, this should work well. HTTP, which is the protocol in use, then I'm specifying the URL, and I've already added the API key of Ngrok to this command prompt, so it should authenticate me and to be able to use this URL. So I think everything should work as expected. Yeah, and the ports have confirmed it. So let me click on enter, the return key. Yeah, so we can see that it's working as expected. You can see the forwarding, the Ngrok URL, this Ngrok URL. So we can use this URL, this Ngrok URL on Azure, and it will automatically be forwarded to my local host over here, which is great, right? So what I will be doing is, let me copy this URL. Let me copy this URL. Okay, so I will stop sharing. I'll stop sharing. I'll go to my Visual Studio again. Yeah, so so you can see what this information that Microsoft included here. So this is the parts that we are to use. So, but in this case now, because Azure cannot does not have a direct channel to my local host, because the DNS doesn't recognize it. So what I'll be doing is I will come over here, I'll paste what I had, then I'll copy this and I'll put it here. Then I'll replace the function name with my actual function name, which is function one, function one. Yeah, so I think this is good. So this is what I'll be using as my webhook. This is what I'll be using as my webhook. So this is what I'll be using as my webhook. I'll copy this. Then I think, but one thing also is that you need to run this program before you add the URL, so that, because right now this particular port 7008, it's currently not active. If I should visit it now, using an HTTP client on my browser, it wouldn't be active. So I need to run this program, this application, to be sure that it will work. So let me run it before I go to Visual Studio to add the webhook. Before I go to Azure Portal rather. So let me stop sharing. It's running now. Then I'll share the output screen. Yeah, so let me share the output screen to be sure that hopefully it works as expected. I haven't tried this particular program. The one I used before I started this video was another application and I already deleted it. Okay, so hopefully this, so I'm waiting for the detection of the event grid before we go to our um to Azure portal. If it gives any error, we'll just start it again. Yeah, so what's happening? Is it done running? Okay, so we can just work with this. The important thing is that we have our log. So what I will do now is let's go and okay. There was an error performing a write operation on the blob storage secret repository. Okay, so probably because I updated my Visual Studio after creating this program and before I ran it and some issues. So what I will do is let me stop sharing. I'll try one other old program that I have on this. And if that does not work, I will just create a function app directly, and that will most definitely work. So let me go over to let me share my Visual Studio again. Then let's open this Azure webhook. Let's open Azure function app. I've also not tried this, but let's see if it will work. Okay, so let me run this. Let me share the output screen. Okay, so this is the isolated app, which is not what I wanted. So what I will do is I will stop sharing, I will close it, and I would create a new one. It's not going to take time, I'll show you. So let me share my Visual Studio. Yeah, so I believe you can see my Visual Studio. So I'll just create a new project very quickly. Azure function. Let me call it function app. I don't know. Function app X. Function app X. Yeah, so it's on Event Grid. Let me pick .NET 6.0. So we shouldn't work with the, I don't think it's the isolated we need. We is the framework .NET 6 that we really want to work with. So we create this event grid trigger. Yeah, so we have our function now. So let me confirm the port this is running on, because we'll need to modify that in our Ngrok. .7075. She's running on 7075. Yeah, so our application is ready. So what I will do now is let's run this and see if it doesn't give us any error before we go over to our Ngrok. It's 7075, right? 7075. Okay. So let me run this. Then I'll stop sharing and I'll share the output screen. Yeah, hopefully this should work. It's looking like this will work. Yeah, so this worked. So I should have done this. I should have just created a new one instead of using old programs. So this is good. So now I'll stop sharing. I'll go back to my Ngrok. I'll go back to my Ngrok. Yeah, so on my Ngrok, you know that the port has changed. So we are no longer using 7008. So let me close this. Control C. Control C. I will run the program again, but now 70, is it 25? Let me confirm. 7075 rather. 7075. Okay. Yeah. So you can see the forwarding, the web interface, blah, blah, blah. 7075. So what I'll be doing is, and take note of this web interface as well, 4040. It's very useful when it comes to working with Ngrok. So we can still use the same URL. We can still use the same URL that I copied, yet I no longer have it copied. So we might need to um let me see if I still have it in my, oh, I still have it copied. Yeah, so what we'll do now is I'll share my Azure portal. I'm going to my browser now. Going to my browser. Where's my browser? This is my browser. Yeah, so this is my browser. We share. Okay, so I'm on my browser now. So what we'll do is over here in the selection of our webhook, I thought I already created an event subscription. Why was I logged out? Okay, so let's just give it a name. Okay, go. Then I already explained all this, so we do not need to waste time on it. Then I go to webhook, but we are not using an Azure function as our handler, as our event handler. Configuring endpoint, so we can now paste our function now. So I believe the function name for this new app is still function one. Let me just confirm. That is function one. Yes, it's function one. And I think the URL is still the same because it's unique for just me. So I think this is good. But one thing I just want to show you about Ngrok is that there's also an interface, a web interface, localhost 4040 that you saw, that you can use to inspect your Ngrok environment. You can see no request to display. So what I'll do now is, this is the URL. I'll click on confirm selection. Click on confirm selection. Then we are going to be clicking on create now, but let me just take another look at what we have. 7075. Hopefully, I do not get it is added correctly. So let me click on create. Create is deploying now. Yeah, so it has been added correctly. I can see it from the interface here that the deployment was done correctly. So what I will do now is you can go to our storage account. From our storage account, if I should go to events, we can now see the event listed underneath. You can see the event, you can see the endpoint is a webhook, and we can see it listed here. Yeah, so this is it. However, another thing we want to do is to be sure that there's a trigger, there's an invocation when we create a blob or delete a blob. So I would be going to the storage account. We are going to want to create a blob now. Containers, data, and now I want to upload something. Let me just upload something like a text file or something. The end goal is for our function app in our computer to be able um to detect any events, any of the selected events. So let's upload this. And now I will quickly stop sharing and go to my output screen in Visual Studio. And this is it. You can see that there have been a trigger. You can see executing function one, reason, event grid trigger, fire that, blah, 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 put blob API. And this is exactly, you can see the name of the file, first file.txt. We can even go into details as to what is contained in the file. You can see the e tag and so many other information around it. So this is really what this video is all about. In the last video, we got the same information from the Azure portal because our event handler was an Azure function. In this case, our event handler is a webhook, which is more flexible because I mean it can be used across various services and technologies, unlike the Azure function that is just limited to a single service within Azure. So in subsequent videos, we are going to be exploring this event grid more before we also go into event hub. It's going to be an interesting experience. One thing I want to say is that if you need more information around the theoretical aspect, if you need a little bit of more intellectual understanding on this event grid, I recommend that you go to Microsoft documentation, read about it, and try to gather materials that will give you a broader understanding on it. I'll be honest with you, I myself, I wouldn't say I understand. I have an in-depth knowledge on it from a theoretical point of view. So this video is more of like the walkthrough in terms of actually using it from Visual Studio, from the Azure portal, allowing you to know how to go about setting it up and the packages that is required, what you need to install to connect it to your Azure environment and things around that. But for if you need info on the theoretical aspect, I strongly recommend you um, read, go through Microsoft documentation and try to cover a lot around that. And those theoretical understanding will even help you in terms of the coding, the development aspect. Okay, so if you find this video helpful, don't hesitate to share, like, and subscribe. If it was a fairly long video, but I want to hope that it was worth your time. Have a nice day.